What's up, guys? Welcome back to the review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 337. This episode is this episode is really freaking clean. Really freaking clean. So with this episode, it starts out with Keen. It's a complete jump cut to something we haven't talked about before. So we cut to Keen outside of a house. He arrives at Vaughn's house for dinner and he brings a pie. Really quick side note, I actually messaged Uru on Patreon and asked her what type of pie Keen brought because we're never going to find out again, and she took it away from us. So I asked her, and Uru confirmed that he brought a Granny Smith apple pie. So some people in the chat guessed that. I honestly should have gotten that because Keen is kind of synonymous with apples. In a few of his scenes, he's always seen eating an apple. So, just real quick, that's canon. Okay, maybe not canon, but I asked Uru and she said like, oh, well, I was thinking something like an apple pie. But anyway, so the two are having dinner together and Keen asks Vaughn if he had never thought about starting a family with someone. And Vaughn says that in positions like his, it's hard to not become a burden to those you love. Now, I'm honestly not sure what he means by this because this can go two ways. The first being him being in opposition with the Bureau, kind of putting someone else at risk just because of affiliation with him, and being a wanted man. Though it could also be considered a reference to just his busy life in general. We don't really know much about people in the Bureau. We don't know what their private lives are like. We know that Valerie has Arlo, but does Valerie have a husband? Is Valerie married to the career, so to speak? I mean, just look at what happened to Jane. She had to give up her family not to work for the Bureau, but to become an asset of the Bureau. But you could say, I'm sure that's a very different situation from someone who like actually works for the Bureau. Anyway. Yeah. So he then asks Keen the same question, and we do get a soft confirmation on Keen's age. He's 29, but Vaughn says that he's almost pushing 30, so we can easily assume right now he's 29 years old. But Keen tells him that he's given up since people tend to drop him on the spot after they hear about his past being a late bloomer. So Vaughn then asks Keen about how Doc is doing, but before Keen can talk, sorry, real quick. Vaughn tells him that being a late bloomer doesn't make him a monster and that he needs to find friends. Keen retorts that he has Vaughn and that Vaughn practically raised him. But Vaughn then retorts, asking him about Doc, if he's heard from Doc recently. But before Keen can talk, they get surrounded. Keen takes note of that thanks to his passive, which we've seen before. Vaughn accepts his fate and just says like, oh, well, looks like it's finally time. But Keen tries to stop him, and Vaughn says that he'll be fine. Take note of that again. We then see that Cass and Byron are at the door. They're telling him that he's being brought in for interrogation, and they also have a warrant to search his home. Now, this was interesting because I did think when Cass said, I've already turned my stuff over to Byron, I thought he was taking it from here. But it seems like Cass is still getting involved is somewhat involved with this case, which is good to see, and I do like that. Because Cass obviously wants to talk to Vaughn. Cass actually wants to ask questions now. So, Cassandra also takes note that Keen is there with Vaughn. Vaughn agrees to go compliantly, and he's just kind of like, hey, all right, let's go. And we see that Keen is watching everyone inside the house as they begin searching. Byron then tells Cass to keep an eye on Vaughn and be cautious. I'm going to say it. Okay, look. Cass, if Vaughn wanted to fight back, you would stand no fucking chance. You're getting your ass whooped, Cass. I'm sorry. But nonetheless, Vaughn sits inside the car as they take him away. He's got the cuffs on. He's got like the big cuffs on and everything. Cass is kind of making small talk, like, "Hey, I hope you're not too uncomfortable." And Vaughn's just like, "Hey." Vaughn's taking the Iroh, kind of like an Iroh-esque approach, just kind of like, "Hey, no worries. If this is easier for everyone else, that's fine by me. Like, it's no big deal. Don't worry. Cass then takes the opportunity to ask Vaughn some questions. She asks about why Keen was there. She assumes that they were close, and Vaughn says that Keen was one of his students. And once again, fucking called it! I fucking called it. So, guys, just put some respect on the name. But he tells Cass about Keen's past as a late bloomer with a violent history. So Keen clearly has to be powerful in some sense, like we assumed before. So it's interesting because, like I said, this also kind of makes me want. We'll get to that. We'll get to that later on. But Vaughn says that he is proud of how far Keen's come, but wishes Keen had got a life and job independent from Vaughn, because Keen has become a bit overprotective. And that's when Uru cuts to showing Keen having easily dismantled all the cops at Vaughn's house and jacking a police car to go catch up with them. So, yeah, like I said, Keen being overprotective, we could see that a bit earlier when he's telling Vaughn, like, don't go with them, like, don't do this. And also kind of like why Keen has also been kind of like, be careful, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think it's kind of shows that in a hindsight, it kind of shows Keen has been scared to lose Vaughn, similar to how John was scared of losing Serafina in some instances. But nonetheless, Vaughn then tells Cass, "You can't force people to change. It takes time and the person has to be willing. Otherwise, the results could be tragic." Now, I feel like this is a reference to both Keen still being a bit violent at times. I mean, he just took down a bunch of innocent officers who were just doing their job. Granted, I don't think they're dead, but they are definitely unconscious. But it could also be a reference to his disagreements with how the Bureau handles the readjustment process. Cass then actually asks him about what strategies were utilized by readjustment facilitators and everything. And Vaughn tells her that involves mental force to guarantee that the person does not act out again. And he tells her about what he would do to students to break them. And when she says that he has to be exaggerating, he tells her that he isn't. And Cass begins to put a few things together. Vaughn says that he also tried to recommend changes that because he did not enjoy seeing what these teenagers were going through, these misguided teens, and seeing their life get drained from them. And Cass then thinks that he's been holding out and holding his students from the Bureau because he doesn't want them to be scarred like others have been that he's seen. And Vaughn then says that he believes humans are naturally open-minded and well-intentioned, but their society encourages otherwise, which Cassandra internally agrees with. Now, this is very interesting because it kind of does also play off what I mentioned about Vaughn before. How it does seem like he is someone who kind of agreed with UnOrdinary's message, even though he hadn't read it yet. And based on how he left the Bureau before, like well before UnOrdinary and everything, it seems like there are definitely other people, other high tiers, other high rankers in the society who don't believe in the system, who see the flaws within the system. And that also does bring me to my other point that I said a few times. Like Cassandra, like Vaughn, I do definitely think there are plenty of other Bureau members who think they're doing right or are misguided and see the flaws in their system and want to change it. So I think we can very well see others. I was checking out the UnOrdinary Reddit, and apparently a lot of people are kind of defending Keon right now. I haven't seen much about it, but I will say we still don't know a whole lot about Keon. He is an awful person, but we still don't know if he is down with everything that the Bureau does. Anyway, after Cass said that he agrees, it happens. The grid covers the road. It catches up to all the cop cars, and suddenly bursts of energy come out from the ground, taking cars down one by one as they fall down to the ground, as they fly up and fall back down to the ground. Cassandra uses her particles to help their car dodge the attack as it swerves and brakes immediately. She rushes out and sees Keen standing there, telling her, "Kindly return the headmaster." And the thing about it is, this isn't a freak out like how John kind of like breaks out like, oh, this is cold and calculated, and I like that a lot, because it seems that Keen is somewhat in control of himself, of his violent tendencies, and that's something you have to be afraid of. When a person with nothing to lose doesn't lash out like John, but instead just comes and is like, "Hey, I'm gonna fuck you up. You know this." That's when you need to be scared. And if Keen is the cold and calculated type, which it seems he is, I am so here for it. So, Keen versus Cass is on. Now, in the reaction, in the stream, a lot of people had a really good names for Keen's ability. Battleships and Gridmaster were two that I saw that were my absolute favorites. But my personal belief is as to what his ability is. I think his ability is called Domain. Because now, it definitely could be something like Gridmaster or Battleship. But I do think someone brought this up in the stream. It could work similar to Law's ability from One Piece, where he can control things within a given domain, as I'm calling it. I noticed this because at the end, someone else did mention it in the stream, but I noticed upon rereading it, at the end of the episode, we actually see Gravel appear to be floating as Keen's holding out his hand. So I'm not sure if he actually is like reaching out for Cassandra, like, "Hey, like hand it over," or if the Gravel is at his command and he's just lifting it up. Nonetheless, I do think it's really cool. And I think, me personally, that Keen is around the 7 territory. So I would say higher 6s to mid 7s is where I think Keen's ability lies, where his level lies. We have seen lately a lot of high tiers hiding their true level from the Bureau, and we've never gotten stat sheets for Keen. So I do think we will see that in the next episode if the fight does happen. Now, real quick, this episode is really good, and I do love the conversations in this episode, and it is setting up for what will hopefully be an epic fight, but it could be more of a talking episode for episode 338, because Cass isn't an enemy. She's not an enemy. Cass is willing to talk things out. Cass is starting to see the truth, and she's starting to realize why the Bureau wants Vaughn taken care of. So I do think Cass could either try to talk to Keen, like, "Hey, knock it off. This, like, I know why you're doing this, but this isn't the way to do it." And Vaughn could easily tell Keen as well, like, "Keen, stop it. You're gonna get yourself in trouble." So episode 338 could be a talking episode, but I can't even lie, because of the sauce, I am very much hoping for a fight, because oh my god, those hands though. Now, going back to Keen and why I think he could be in the 7s, and why I also think like his ability being Domain could apply. Way back when John first moved into the dorms, we've known for a long time that Keen has to at least be a high tier. He has a passive, which we've seen ever since Keon came to the school. Keen sensed him immediately, and it was like, all right, there's a high tier here. But also, when John moved into the dorms, we saw Keen use his ability to force John and Blake to shake hands. Now, granted, you could just say, it is incredibly easy to say that Keen just used his ability on 2 people who were not fighting back, who were not using their ability to do that. But it could possibly also lend credence to the fact that Keen can make domains and control things within them. Still, we don't really know the specifics. It could honestly be something more akin to like battleships and or to like a battleship strategy where he can make a grid on the floor and like shoot out things from the ground with energy. But I think a grid type ability where he can also just kind of like shoot out his aura or, you know, something else, or just like, you know, pull out the ground and everything too. I think that'd also be really cool. So Uru, if it's domain, you already know, Uru. Send me my check. You've been using a lot of my ideas lately, Uru. You gotta send me my check. Uru. That was the deal. Anyway, so yeah, and yeah, that is pretty much it, honestly. I really liked this episode. This episode was really cool. It was just another talking episode, which is totally fine. That's honestly okay. I don't mind that one bit because the conversations in this episode have been really good. And honestly, for the most part, a lot of the episodes for this ever since the return have all been really freaking good. Like, I don't think there's been a bad episode, like an honestly bad episode for a long time. There have, of course, been a few episodes where I've kind of been like, why? But nothing really bad, so to speak. Anyway, I honestly give this episode a level 8. It is a really good episode, and it leads up to something that will hopefully be so goddamn epic, but I won't be upset if it's not. But with all of that being said, guys, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And as always, everyone, see you, Space Cowboy.